Hello. Welcome to another class on fortifying your faith in a time of deconstruction. I'm glad you can join me today. We've been talking about various topics over the last several months, and I'm glad to be able to bring another idea before you today. It seems like Bible bashing has become very popular. I mean, it's so commonplace. And, peer pressure is rough. I know for our teens and our children especially, that peer pressure can be so difficult. But also for us adults, it can be rough as well. And societal pressure is really rough. And to be politically correct is really tough. To have this social pressure to believe certain things and to act certain ways is really hard. And one of the things that we hear a lot, there's statements that we hear a lot. In fact, we hear them so often, they're almost like cliches. We just hear them so often and repeat it over and over again that people just assume they must be true. One of those statements is this. It says the Bible has been copied, changed, and translated so many times and is so full of contradictions that to consider it historically correct. I mean, how can we consider it from God? We don't even know if it's historically correct. This is the statement. And usually when that statement's made, it's made as if this is proven fact. Of course, if someone actually says this to you in a conversation, I think the first question should be, well, what do you mean by that? What do they mean by that, actually? And what you want to know is, are they just mimicking what they've heard other people say? Or have they actually done some research? And if they come back with some kind of research they might have done, another question could be is, well, how did you come to that conclusion? Because we want to know what they're thinking so we can converse with them and have a conversation with them about this. People need to be able to ask questions. People need to do the research. That's how you come to a knowledge of faith, is by being taught of God and by listening to what the Bible tells us. And so we need to have confidence in what it's saying. Jeff Allen is a comedian, and I think he's a pretty good comedian. He's one of those that doesn't use bad language, which makes it really well. And he was talking about a time when he was going through a real rough patch in his life. Him and his wife were considering a divorce, and he had bought every self-help book in the world to try to bring some improvement to himself and to his marriage. And as he was continuing in comedy, there was another comedian that he was introduced to. But the other comedian was a millionaire. He apparently had owned some businesses that he had sold, did quite well, and he had enough money to have a membership at a golf club that Jeff wanted to go to. And so he befriended this fellow. And on the golf course, he began to find out this man was a Christian. And he said, okay. And eventually the conversation came around to the Bible. The man mentioned something about a Bible. And Jeff said, hey, I don't want to hear anything about the Bible. I'm an atheist. I don't believe any of that stuff. And the guy responded with, well, what is it about the Bible that you disagree with? And Jeff said, well, actually, I've never read the Bible. And the man said, well, then you're not an atheist. You're a moron. He didn't know how to respond to that. He said, well, because an atheist is somebody who's studied about life, and he's investigated life, and he's studied about the Bible, and he's become a scholar and expert in these things. He's come to the conclusion that there is no God. You've kind of circumvented the whole process by just jumping to a conclusion and saying, well, there's no God and the Bible's not true. He says, you're just lazy and moronic. And it made the guy think, and over the years, he was able to come in contact with Bible teaching and become a Christian. But people need to be able to ask questions. They need to have these questions answered. They need to be able to investigate these things. Progressive Christians sometimes say, well, my church that I left, they just wouldn't let me ask any questions. I just read that from a guy, he's supposed to be some kind of recovering pastor or something. They wouldn't let me ask questions. Well, I don't know of a church that doesn't allow you to ask questions. I think what had happened with him, with many people, they just don't get the answers they want. And so they claim, well, they're just not addressing my question. Well, yeah, they are addressing your question. You just don't want to accept that. Some years ago, a young man came to our church and started worshiping with us. And I got to know him a little bit. And he told me that he had been a Portland police officer and that he wasn't really a Christian, but he had noticed in his work as a police officer that Christians just seem to have better lives. He says they seem to live better. And he was just trying to find out what it is that allowed that to happen. And so we started studying with one another. And he said, well, I don't even know why I would even believe in God. He says, do you have reasons for believing in God? So we start studying about evidences for believing in God. And, well, several weeks later, he became a Christian. And he was going to our community college. And at the time, the community college was putting out a school newspaper. And there was an article that came up in the school newspaper that upset him. It was done by a social science teacher and just basically said that the Bible was historically unreliable. And he wanted me to write a response to what she said. And he said, I'll try to write a response too. And so because of his urging, I did. I wrote an article back. But the article that she had written was kind of interesting because it's always interesting to me that people are amazed that there are 4 accounts of the Gospels. I mean, 4 people tell the same story from a different perspective and for a different purpose. And so not all those stories are exactly alike. Some will leave out a thing, some will add a thing. And none of them are exactly alike. I mean, what would be the point of having 4 exact stories? But these are 4. 2 people are eyewitnesses of what happened. One is a secondary person who'd heard what had happened from somebody that actually was an eyewitness. Luke did this great investigation as to what was going on. So we have 4 different accounts. Now, some people, though, they expected every one of those to be the same. And if something is different, what they say is immediately, aha, there's a contradiction. See, it was different. For instance, as the resurrection, Matthew mentioned there was an earthquake, and none of the other Gospels did. So, they would not leave that out if they were also there. And so there's a contradiction here. It's not reliable. I mean, come on, you need to investigate a little bit further than that. I mean, Christians have what we call gospel parallels. Every one of the Gospels is lined up next to each other. You can see all the stories that are similar, those that are different, lined up. We have what's called gospel harmonies. Instead of the 4 lined up, they're mixed together, and so they read as one story. If you want just one story, you can put them all together like that. And I have those in my library that you can look at. But what you have are not contradictions, you have differences. Differences are not necessarily contradictions. Just recently, I had somebody call me up, and he was upset, and he says, I want to know how many times the rooster crowed after Peter denied Jesus. You see, Matthew, Luke, and John say, before the rooster crows, you'll deny me 3 times. But Mark says, before the rooster crows twice, you'll deny me. And so I want to know, how come they say once and Mark says twice? Well, when you read it, and you can read it, you can investigate it, Matthew, Luke, and John don't tell you how many times the rooster is going to crow. Jesus just said before the rooster crows. Mark is just a little bit more specific. He gives us a little more detail. He said that Jesus said it was going to happen twice. It's different. It's not a contradiction. One didn't say, the other 3 Gospels didn't say, well, he's going to go once and then it's going to happen. They just didn't say. They said it was going to happen. And Mark said, well, it would actually happen twice. I guess, no, there's family was going to a football game. There's a husband and wife and their son, and the son, of course, was a teenager, and he didn't want to sit with his parents. It was a high school football game, and so his dad said to him, he said, meet me here at the buzzer. And so they parted their ways. And his wife had not been to a football game before, so he's trying to explain things to him. And he explained to her that they were going to pick up their son at the fourth buzzer. It seems like this particular place, they had a buzzer after every quarter. And he says, out to the fourth buzzer. Well, why did he tell her the fourth buzzer, but he just told his son at the buzzer? Well, because the son would realize that the buzzer was the last buzzer. You know, we beat the buzzer. We have these buzzer breaking plays, and we know what it is. It's not that he told his son one thing and his wife another. He just told them a different thing, that they should understand what was happening, and they did. And so I began to explain that differences were not necessarily contradictions, and they're not. And the article also said that there are just no human witnesses to the resurrection. And how can we trust something that they had no eyewitnesses to? Now, that's kind of misleading. There were no humans inside the tomb when he came back to life. That's true. In fact, as far as that goes, the resurrection is a PR nightmare. I mean, there are no cameras there. There are no reporters there. I mean, the greatest event in history, and nobody's there really to witness it. What's that about? Well, it's because no one really believed it was going to happen. Jesus said it was going to happen, but whoever raises from the dead? I mean, even the disciples were skeptical. So there were no reporters. There was no one there because no one believed it was going to happen. In fact, it's the great exception that proves the rule. This is just something that happened by the power of God, that Jesus was resurrected. He said it would happen. No one believed it. But skeptics watched him die. They watched him be buried. And later, skeptics saw him alive. Well, how could you say that no one saw the resurrection? They did see the resurrection. They saw the resurrected body of Jesus. They saw Jesus after he'd come back from the dead. In fact, 1 Corinthians 15 talks about all the witnesses that saw him. One of my favorite stories is in the Gospel of Luke, the two men on the road to Emmaus, and Jesus catches up with them. And so, you know, some of the things that people have just grabbed onto over the years, just with a little bit of explanation, a little bit of investigation, they can be shown to be false. And one of the other things that was said in the article is that the Bible just doesn't hold up to scientific scrutiny. And the idea is that there is no way for science and research to verify the accuracy of the Bible. Now, the implication is always that Christianity is an emotional, religious experience, while unbelievers are living a scientific and reasonable life. Well, that's just not true either. Can the Bible be looked at to be seen as being historically accurate? The Bible mentions people, it mentions events, it mentions places, it mentions entire civilizations. And we have forensic scientists, archaeologists, who confirm over and over the accuracy of the Bible. An example, and I've used this example a lot. It's easy because, and it was such a glaring accusation against the Bible. In the Old Testament mentions the Hittite people, the Hittite nation. And the critics would say, well, where's this Hittite nation? We've never seen a Hittite nation. We don't know anything about that. And they continue to say that until 1906, when German archaeologists uncovered the capital city of the Hittite Empire. And not only do we know about the Hittite Empire now, we have actually literally volumes written about the Hittite Empire. And there are other examples. Don't give names and don't give places and don't give dates that can be checked and verified, because they will be checked and verified. And the Gospel of Luke does exactly that. If he's not writing because he was there and because he has researched this, then he's going to be in trouble. Because, for instance, in Luke the 2nd chapter, he says, "Now in those days a decree went out from Caesar Augustus, that a census be taken of all the inhabited earth. This was the first census taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria." Now he names names. He's talking about places. These are people and places that can be historically verified. In chapter 3, he says, "Now in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, when Pontius Pilate was governor of Judea, and Herod was tetrarch of Galilee, and his brother Philip was tetrarch of the region of Iturea and Trachonius, and Lysanias was tetrarch of Abilene. In the high priesthood of Annas and Caiaphas, the word of God came to John." Now, he just names one name after another. He actually gives the dates, the years. These are things that can be researched and proven to either be true or false. And those who have researched it, archaeologists have looked at these things and say, well, they are accurate. One archaeologist says there's not been one proven thing there's not been one thing in the Bible that has been proven to be wrong. That over and over they've been shown to be true. In the book of Acts, Luke mentions 32 countries, 54 cities, 9 islands, 95 people. All of these can be checked, and all of them are accurate. Well, the Bible's been copied and changed so many times. Well, it has been copied many, many, many times. But it hasn't been changed. In fact, in 1948, the Dead Sea Scrolls were uncovered. And one of the great things about this is that they have scrolls in there, manuscripts of the Old Testament that dated years before any manuscripts that we had in our hands. And what did it show? There was absolutely no changes whatsoever. Oh, sometimes words were misspelled. Sometimes there was a minor discrepancy. But there was no major changes like are being accused of the Bible. In fact, the New Testament has thousands of manuscripts and fragments. And what they prove over and over is that the Bible has not been changed. Yes, there are some spelling errors. There are some things that actually have been omitted and some things that have been added in some places. But the thing is, there are so many of these manuscripts, you just look at one and go, wow, this is not in any of the other manuscripts. Somebody accidentally added this on. Or this is in all these other manuscripts. Somebody accidentally left it out. And so the idea that it's been copied and changed is a little bit of an exaggeration. And the idea that it's been translated so many times, as if it's been changed so many times. The Bible was originally written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't speak any of those languages, but I do speak English quite well. So I need to have those Old Testament Hebrew scriptures and the New Testament Greek scriptures to be translated into English. And we have many modern translations. You say, well, why do we have so many translations? Because the English language has changed. And some have approached the idioms a little bit different. But they're, if you look at all the different translations, which you should investigate, there's not contradictions, there's not changes, there's differences, and that's where we're at. The accusations that have been made over and over, that maybe you've heard some, and maybe you've heard similar things, they've just been proved to be unfounded. And this is important for you to understand. Right after I had responded to that article in the school paper, I got a letter in the mail from a woman who said she was a student at the school, and that when she had seen that article, her faith was quite shaken. And she told me the story. She said when she'd gone to the University of Oregon that some of these things were presented to her, and her faith really faltered, and she fell away from God for a while, fell away from the church, and she was just starting to get back her faith and starting to develop a relationship with God, and then this article hit her. And she was reeling a little bit, and then she said, came my article. She said, your article saved my life. I knew there were answers, I just didn't know what they were. And that's one of the points I try to make over and over. There are so many answers to all these accusations. And they're going to keep coming up because the Bible tells us there's going to be mockers and critics that come up and want to continue to mock us. But just investigate. Ask the questions. Be honest about it. The Bible is scrutinized like no other book in the world. And sometimes the people trying to scrutinize it use different rules for other books than they use for the Bible, actually. Foy Wallace Jr. wrote this. I thought this was a good summarization. He says, the Bible is not primarily a book of history, but everything it says touching the matters of history is historically correct. The Bible is not a textbook of science, but everything it says touching the field of science is scientifically accurate. None of the blunders of men have crept into the Bible on any subject. The Bible is up to date. The Bible is not only old and ancient, but it is new and modern. It never becomes obsolete. When men tell you the Bible is unscientific, they either do not know science or they do not know the Bible. Possibly neither. But if they know the Bible and if they know science, having the knowledge of both, none could dare make the claim that the Bible is unscientific. The Bible is not merely scientific, it is pre-scientific. I want to close with a poem that I have loved for years. It used to be on the first page of the Hurt Bible correspondent courses, and I don't know who wrote this, but I think it always sounds so true. He says, last night I passed a blacksmith's door and heard the anvil ring with vesper chimes. When looking in, I saw upon the floor old hammers worn with beating years of time. How many anvils have you had, said I, to wear and batter all these hammers so? Just one, he said, then said with twinkling eye, the anvil wears the hammers out, you know. And so I thought, the anvil of God's word, for ages skeptics' blows have beat upon, yet though the noise of falling blows was heard, the anvil is unharmed, the hammer's gone. Well, that's certainly true. I hope this strengthens your faith some, and we're going to continue to look at the Bible and talk about some of the unique aspects of the Bible that some people don't recognize, don't even realize. And we'll talk about that for a while, and then we'll go on, move on a little bit further to try to fortify our faith in a time of deconstruction. Well, thank you so much for joining me.